Hello, my name is Heather Ballish. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about who I am, my background, how I came to make this YouTube channel, and what the channel is about. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. I am from originally Chardon, Ohio, small little town where I grew up. Spent my first 18 years of my life there. And then around 18, I decided I wanted to go off to college and went and paid my way through the University of Cincinnati. Like most people, I had no idea what I wanted to do at that age. Still just figuring it out. I don't know if we ever figure it out, but that's a side note. And so I was undecided my first year in college, eventually navigated to take on a communications major because I was like, I have to do something. And then eventually I found photography. I grew up most of my life as a painter. I love to paint, I love visual art. And so when I found photography, I was like, wow, this is so cool. A whole new form of visual art. So I was about 20 at the time, and had already been in school for almost 2.5 years at that point, and I completely changed my major. At that point, actually, I added a second major on, and then went for electronic media, cinematic arts and electronic media. Graduated in that after 5 full years of school, and at my last year of school, I just knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker. The funny thing is that most of my life I've known that I've wanted to be a visual artist who tells important stories, who speaks of things that are important to me and tells stories that I find fascinating. And wild that it took me until the age of 30 to start a YouTube channel. Shout out to perfectionism and limiting beliefs. But here I am now. And so I always kind of knew this, but I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea how to bring that into fruition. And so after coming towards the end of my college, knowing that I was trying to at least navigate this path into filmmaking, I specialized in cinematography and got on a couple movies, started working in the camera department, and was like, let's go to LA. So I moved out of Ohio for the first time at the age of 23. Moved myself to Los Angeles. My sister helped me do it cross country. We loaded my Prius up with everything we could fit, sold everything else, drove across the country, camped on the way, and moved myself to Los Angeles. I lived in a artist community home in bunk beds because that was all I could afford, and also because I remember my sister telling me, think of all the friends you'll make. And what an incredible piece of advice that was, because community really is everything, and that community made my experience in Los Angeles. And so pretty much the next 6-7 years I spent living in Los Angeles. I worked in the camera department and the lighting department. I drove Lyft and Uber and Postmates, trying to afford living in Los Angeles as I built my career as a filmmaker. I eventually made my way into the union, the cinematographers union, and did not like that at all. And so I remember in 2019, I was 26 years old, and I got on like a huge union job. I was working on a TV show for months, all the works, hundreds of people. It was big production, and I hated it. By the end of it, I felt so used and abused. I felt so mistreated and so sad. So like, whoa, this is not what I expected, and I worked my whole life so far to get here. And so, but I made a bunch of money. So I took all the money and I decided to take my first trip. I always wanted to travel. I always knew I wanted to travel, but I never could afford it. I didn't know anyone who traveled. I had no idea how to bring this into fruition. So I was just kind of like, YOLO, let's figure it out. So I planned a 6-week backpacking trip through Europe, and I used all the money that I made on that really terrible job, and I bought myself a camera, and I bought myself my first international travel. I decided that this lifestyle wasn't working for me, and it was time to do something. I had no idea what to do. I was super afraid and super scared and super sad, and I was like, well, I've always wanted to make my own content, but I could never afford a camera, so I bought my first camera at the age of 26. And I always wanted to travel, but could never afford that either, so I was like, let's go. So I pretty much spent all my money on a camera and on a trip, and it was absolutely life-changing. I spent 6 weeks backpacking, and I was like, whoa, this is incredible. I've learned so much about the world, about myself, about my whole beliefs, and mind just expanded at the possibilities of things that I never realized before. So I came back to the United States and was kind of in a rut. I was kind of like, what do I do now? Like, I still had a lot of limiting self-beliefs. I had a lot of worthiness issues of making my own content. So I slowly worked towards it. I slowly built my career up as a cinematographer, filming other people's content and movies and music videos and short films. And then eventually I worked my way into being a director. I really, really love working with actors, working with people, telling incredible stories, whether it's a documentary or a narrative film. I absolutely love directing. And so I became a very good director and eventually opened my own production company. And still living in Los Angeles, and everyone around me is like, whoa, like a lot of my friends and supporters and loved ones were like, you're living the dream. You have made it to the place that a lot of people want to be at, to your dreams, right? You've made it to, you're directing movies. You are traveling to direct movies. You are your own company. I was pretty financially secure. And I was just unhappy. I was so unhappy. I was smoking a whole bunch of weed. I was addicted to weed at this point. Just food, everything, trying to numb myself, trying to be like, why am I not happy? I should be happy. This is where I've worked so hard to get to. And everybody's telling me I should be happy. And so throughout the next couple of years, I continued my career in this position and slowly started to travel. Like I would work, and then I would use all that money to go travel. And not that I want to say that traveling's expensive. It's really, really not. And that'll be a topic for another moment. But I swear that it's easy. But I just had such a desire and craving to do it that I was willing to do anything I could to experience the world. And so I'd work really hard, and then I'd go and I'd travel for 6 weeks, 2 months at a time. And eventually I started meeting people that were traveling full time. That didn't even have a home, a car, none of these material things that I was told my whole life that I was supposed to have. And I instantly knew, I was like, my soul was like, that's it, like that's what you're supposed to do. But of course my mind and my ego was terrified. I was so scared, so like, whoa, 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 you can't do that, like, but what about all this comfort and all this security? And so I continued to numb myself, eat, smoke weed, do whatever I can to keep myself in this comfort zone. And then in, I don't even remember what year it was, 2021, I took a trip to Mexico. It was kind of last minute. With a couple of friends, we decided, let's go spend a couple weeks in Tulum. You know, it was like we were just starting, it was that summer that everybody thought we were starting to come out of the lockdown, and we had been cooped up for a year and a half, and I had really spent a lot of that year and a half reflecting on my life. You can't go work on movie sets in the middle of COVID, so I really had to sit, and that was kind of for the first time that, you know, I tried to numb myself as much as possible, but I couldn't numb myself for a year and a half. So as the world started to open, I was like, okay, I need to do something, let's go to Mexico. So me and my couple of friends, my 2 friends, decided to go to Tulum. We'd heard a lot about it, seemed like a cool place. And before Tulum, I would always consider that I am I always really valued love, and respecting each other, and I look at animals and plants and people as all worthy of love and respect and attention, as all as separate entities. And I had all these beliefs, but I never had any labels for them. I never had any guidance. I grew up Christian, and in my late teens, I kind of was stopping going to church. I still felt like this presence of God, but the Bible didn't quite make sense to me. It felt like very fear-based, and so I felt this loving presence of God, but I just didn't really have a lot of language for it. And so I go to Tulum for 6 weeks, and I spent some time living by myself, some time living with friends, and came to, through all of these wild serendipities, I came to spirituality. I came to meet all of these people. I learned about energy and how to work with it. I learned about setting energetic boundaries. I learned that I'm an empath and I could feel everybody, and that wasn't normal. Other people, not everybody can do that. I learned about the universe, and there was just so many books that like fell into my lap about reincarnation. So many people that just walked up to me and they were like, I don't know why, but I think you need to know this, or I think you need this podcast. And I met people and learned about how Tulum actually was one of the Mayans' astrology hubs. Back in ancient times, it was like their astrology university, and all of the names of the roads are named after the zodiacs and all of these things. And so it just kind of like blew my mind. I was like, whoa, this is one of the things I've been looking for so long. And this is like a lot of the ways that I've been feeling, and the meaning that I relate to life, and the meaning that I've been searching for, and the God and the universe that I feel connected to, and like myself and things that are happening to me started to be explained too. So I did some ceremonies. I did like a Temazcal ceremony, which is like a sweat lodge, and I'm crying with my friend, and I'm opening my heart for the first time in decades, and all of these beautiful things. And so afterwards, I go back to my home, at that time in Los Angeles, California, and I was just forever changed. I was like, this doesn't feel like my reality anymore. I felt like this reverse culture shock. Being back in this world that I had built up with these old beliefs. And so I slowly just tried to learn. I luckily had some conscious people around me who showed me some different avenues, some different resources. I started to study astrology feverishly. I started to, anything that I could get my hands on about spirituality and energy and just anything that came my way, I was enthralled with. And of course, I deeply believe that when we open ourselves to these things, then they just start to come. The universe really, I call it the breadcrumbs of serendipity. When you start to open to them, the universe is like putting cookie crumbs along your path, like, come here, come look at this, come see this. And so that totally happened for me, and thank you, shout out. I really appreciate that because I needed it. I really didn't have a lot of direction besides just stumbling blind and being like, I'm gonna try to figure this out no matter what that means. And so cut to, like, I'm in Los Angeles, I'm working, I'm directing, I'm building my business, I'm also confused and learning about spirituality, and I keep doing this cycle of making money and then going and traveling, and making money and going and traveling. And so I spent a lot of time traveling in traveling in Mexico and in South America, meeting incredible people, learning beautiful things about the world and spirituality. And each place that I traveled to, Guatemala, Colombia, where else did I go at that time? I went back to Mexico, and is that when I went to Peru? No, it was Colombia and Guatemala and Mexico again, and then eventually Hawaii too. I was just, every place I went, I would learn more about myself. It was like learning more about the world taught me about myself. And it was incredible. It became this insatiable desire to continue to grow by exploring the world. And so after meeting all these people that just traveled full time, and really by like the beginning of the summer of 2022, I just was so torn. I've never felt like this is probably one of the lowest, darkest, most intense moments of my life, because there was this huge calling inside of me, but I had no idea what that calling was. I had no idea what it wanted. I didn't know what it was trying to tell me. I had no idea what that life looked like that it was calling me to. It was so much unknown. It was like I was supposed to jump off a cliff into complete dark abyss and just hope that I would be okay. And then the cliff was this beautiful life that I had spent my whole life up until that point. I was 27, building. I was 28, building this beautiful career, my own business, this amazing family and community in Los Angeles. I had also spent years doing some of my own healing on myself, building myself there with this identity that I had as a person living in Los Angeles, a filmmaker, a director, a stable home renter and car owner. And so I did it. Long story, very long, very difficult, many ups and downs and many tears and heartbreaks and guilt, feeling like I was leaving the people that meant the most to me, and feeling guilty, like was I telling them that their life wasn't good enough by feeling like my life wasn't good enough, and that's not what I wanted, and that's not how I actually felt. And so there was just so much fear and guilt. And this long story, to make it short, I did it. I sold everything, even though every single step of the way I felt like there were weights attached to my ankles. I felt like I was being drugged down. I felt like I was suffocating. I felt like my heart was breaking. I was crying all the time, just randomly bursting into tears. But I did it. Over the summer, I sold everything I owned, I gathered. I told my roommates that I loved so deeply that I wanted to move out, and I was going to go travel the world. I told all my friends I had a going away party, all the things, the whole shebang. I had a cat that I gave to him. Well, not gave, but my dad and my stepmom are taking care of me. Shout out, thank you very much. So many things that just felt so sticky, and so like, I can't do this. I have all of these commitments, all of these things. So got rid of all those, sold it all, rehoused it temporarily, coming back from my cat. Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. It was so hard. And I remember the first part of my journey, deciding to become a full-time world traveler, deciding to go nomadic. Didn't have a lot of money. I had a couple $1,000s from selling my car, pretty much. I was, leaving Los Angeles, so I stopped getting a lot of calls for work. And I pretty much had the money that I had from selling all of my belongings. And was scared, but was like, this calling inside of me it's screaming at this point that I can't not listen. I can't do anything else. And so I have to. I will not be able to survive if I don't do this, because this calling is dragging me there. Like, there's no other choice. So with all my fears and all my sadness and sorrow, I did it. I jumped. And my first trip, thank God, was a couple of my nomadic friends had made plans to all meet up in this tiny little town in Ecuador on the beach during their rainy season, during their off season. And so we all share a house. I'm in a twin bed with my other friend sharing a room, and living in a house that's probably for like 4 people, and we've got like 8 of us in there. And we're living in this tiny little village, and it is gorgeous, and it's rainy season. There's mud everywhere. You can't even walk down the road without getting covered in mud. There's no grocery store there. You have to buy your groceries every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday out of the back of this guy's truck who farms the local land. And it was incredible. It was the perfect landing spot that I needed. And just like sitting with myself for this month. I spent so much time meditating, journaling, crying, flipping tarot, praying, everything you can think of, doing yoga, talking with my friends, looking at astrology, to just like ground myself. Like, holy crap, I just did that. I just completely flipped the whole table that my life was sitting on, and I just went poof, let's see what happens. And so it was incredible, and so scary, and I'm so glad I did it. Wow, did it change my entire life. And so now it has been a year and a half, and I have been traveling full time. I have been all over the world. It's the way that the universe like caught me when I jumped off that cliff, that metaphorical cliff. They didn't just catch me, it like just exploded me into a million stars and took my future in this incredible direction into becoming everything I'd ever wanted to be. Even though I didn't admit to myself that I wanted to be these things, it was like the calling that was calling me to become nomadic was all the dreams that I had ignored my whole life and buried and tried to tell myself didn't exist because I was afraid that I was never going to be able to accomplish them. I was afraid that I wasn't worthy of them, that I was dreaming too big. And so I didn't know it at the time that that's in the universe and God, that's what was calling me. And so once I took the leap and I walked the path that was calling me, I started having all these realizations of like, oh, I've wanted to go to India and climb the Himalayas my whole life, but it took me being on top of the Himalayas to be like, this has been a lifelong dream of mine that I didn't even admit to myself because I was terrified that I couldn't accomplish it, and so I didn't want to disappoint myself by even admitting it to myself. Wild. So yeah, over the next year and a half, I then started getting called to do the content that I really wanted to make. I had always wanted to, I was fantasized about the Travel Channel and the History Channel and being on Nat Geo and traveling the world. And I remember living in Los Angeles trying to be like, how do I get these travel jobs and do this? And then I started traveling. And I started getting calls to film documentaries all over the world. And they're like, hey, we see that you're a fantastic filmmaker and you travel. How great. Let's come do this travel show with us. And so I went to Ethiopia and had an incredible experience there filming a documentary. Also aligned with my spiritual beliefs, really incredible. Shout out Lotus Shark. They are an amazing production company. Check them out. And then I traveled to India. I got this call from a friend connecting me with another now friend to go to India and build this documentary together. I directed it and I was also in it and filming it. And we went to India and we asked the East about like spirituality and meditation, and you'll see it, it's incredible. But all of these things that were so in alignment with my beliefs and how I wanted to travel and with my talents, and they all started coming together. And then I traveled to Southeast Asia. I traveled all over the world in this year and a half. Went to Peru, went everywhere, and also back to my hometown in Chardon, Ohio. I get to spend a month at a time coming to visit my family. I go back to Los Angeles to visit the people that I consider my family there. So I travel over the US, travel over the world. And as I'm traveling and as I'm realizing all of these dreams, I'm starting to get pulled in this crazy direction of opening up to these dreams that I've always had my whole life but never admitted to myself. And I start to slowly feel this like overwhelm. I'm like, wow, there's all these things that I want to do now that I'm admitting to myself. And there's this purpose that I feel that's like calling to me that I don't know what it is. And it felt really overwhelming that I couldn't figure out what it is. And I couldn't figure out how to get there. And of course, there's again all this fear of worthiness, all this fear of self-limiting beliefs that like are also standing in my way. All these belief systems that I was wearing a veil of that was keeping me from seeing my truth. And so, cut to just a couple months ago, I felt Bali calling me. Bali, Indonesia was just, I had no idea. I'd never been there, didn't know anyone. I knew a couple, well, yeah, at that point I didn't know anyone that had been there. And Bali was just calling to me, so I'm like, okay, let's go to Bali. I go to Bali, I sit there, I have all of these crazy experiences that pretty much sum up to me realizing my life purpose, which, a cosmic giggle, joke's on me, I've known the whole time, but just couldn't see it. I just couldn't put two and two together. Just like I said that when I was, finding filmmaking in college and being a painter growing up, I always knew that I wanted to use visual art to share myself and share stories and share my beliefs and travel the world and share the stories that I learned from traveling the world. But it took me traveling the world, becoming a filmmaker, becoming this visual artist, and breaking through all of these walls of feeling worthy and my own limiting beliefs, my own perfectionism, to be like, wait, this is what I've always wanted, and I'm allowed to do it. And now here I am. I remember so many times trying to do something like this and setting up my studio so perfect and all lights and rehearsing again and again and spending hours with content and then trying to edit it and being like overwhelmed. And now here I am in my mom's dining room just winging it because I just want to be me. I just want to be me. I just want to tell whatever comes to mind, whatever the fuck I want, whatever is being channeled from the universe and from God to my camera and anyone who happens to watch this, about what I've learned in my life, what I've learned from traveling the world, what I've learned as an astrologer, what I've learned as a spiritual being, what I've learned as a human living in this incarnation, what I've learned from my past lives, and what I've also learned from being a psychic, which is, I'm not going to lie, a little hard for me to say on camera. I'm just recently becoming really comfortable talking about this. So shout out to fear and overcoming them. But anyway, so here I am in Bali, realizing this crazy life purpose that I have, and realizing that it's not that crazy. It's literally what I've wanted the whole time. But I, for some reason, couldn't see it or couldn't let myself have it or couldn't put all the puzzle pieces together. So now here I am putting the puzzle pieces together, creating this YouTube channel to share myself and whatever I feel like I need to talk about and whatever I feel like the world or whoever listens might want to hear. And not want to hear, I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it because I feel this calling to share it. I feel this intuition. And so really trusting myself, trusting my intuition, trusting my knowledge, and sharing too stories from all over the world. I have all these stories and I will continue to gather them of things that I've learned in different countries, and then interviewing locals and filming the local scene, and so sharing those here as well. I will also be talking about astrology because wow, is it incredible, and I've studied that all over the world. I've studied Vedic astrology in India, I studied shamanic astrology in South America, I studied Western astrology in the West, and also while I've been traveling. And I will also be talking about love and relationships. I've been very blessed with my incredible partner, Joshua Sting. And so that is kind of me. That is this channel. I hope that this feels good to you. I hope that something worked for you, it resonates with you. And I send lots of love and gratitude, and thanks for watching.